When you hear the name Confucius, what comes to mind? You probably picture a statue, a stern, majestic old man with a long beard and flowing robes. You might think of fortune cookies or wise quotes about patience and success. You think of him as the ultimate winner, the great sage whose philosophy built the backbone of Eastern civilization. But if you could travel back in time to the dusty roads of China in the year 490 BCE, you wouldn't find a celebrity. You would find a homeless, unemployed, exhausted old man. You would find a man who had spent decades knocking on the doors of powerful kings, begging them to listen to his ideas, only to be laughed at, ignored, and chased away. By every metric of his own time, Confucius was a failure. He died believing his life's work had been a waste. He never wrote a book. He never ruled a kingdom. He never saw his vision come to life. So how did this loser end up influencing more human beings than almost anyone else in history? How did a man who couldn't keep a government job end up teaching the world, and even America's founding fathers, how to run a government? This is the untold story of the greatest failure in history. To understand the man, we first have to understand the world that broke him. Confucius was born in 551 BCE near the city of Khufu. This wasn't a time of peace and meditation, it was a time of chaos. China was torn apart by warlords and corruption. It was a dog-eat-dog world where the strong took what they wanted and the weak suffered. And Confucius started out as one of the weak. His father died when he was just a baby, leaving his family in desperate poverty. He didn't grow up in a palace with tutors. He grew up knowing what it felt like to be hungry. As a young man, he had to work all sorts of odd, menial jobs just to put food on the table and support his mother. But while he was sweeping floors or counting grain, he was doing something else. He was watching. He watched how the local officials bullied the poor. He watched how society was crumbling because no one followed any rules of decency. And he decided he was going to fix it. Despite his poverty, he was obsessed with learning. He managed to educate himself, mastering the ancient arts and history. He studied so hard that he passed the rigorous exams to become a civil servant. This was his big break. He finally got a foot in the door. He became a government official. He rose to the rank of minister. He finally had a little bit of power. He thought, this is it. Now I can change the system from the inside. But he quickly realized a painful truth. The system didn't want to be changed. The rulers he worked for were corrupt, selfish, and uninterested in fairness. They didn't want a moral lecture. They wanted power. Disgusted by the unfairness he saw every day, Confucius did something unthinkable. He quit. He gave up his career, his stability, and his status. He decided that if he couldn't fix one small state, he would go find a ruler somewhere else who was worthy of his vision. This decision kicked off the most difficult period of his life. For 12 long years, Confucius roamed across China. This wasn't a glamorous book tour. It was an exile. He traveled from state to state, offering his services to kings and dukes. His pitch was radical but simple. A ruler should be a role model. He believed that if a leader was virtuous, the people would naturally be good, just like grass bends when the wind blows over it. He proposed a society built on what he called the 5 virtues: Ren, charity, and humanity; Yi, honesty and integrity; Li, correct behavior and propriety; Zhu, knowledge and learning; Xin, faithfulness and loyalty. He told kings that their job wasn't to hoard wealth, but to treat their subjects with kindness. You can imagine how well that went over with the brutal warlords of the time. They looked at this wandering philosopher and essentially said, "Get lost." He was mocked. He was ignored. In some places, he was driven out of town. There were times he ran out of food. There were times his life was in danger. For 12 years, he walked the earth, shouting into the wind, looking for just one powerful person who would listen. He never found one. Eventually, old and tired, he realized his political career was over. He returned home to Khufu, accepting his defeat. He spent the last years of his life doing the only thing he had left: teaching. He gathered a small group of faithful students and simply talked to them. He didn't write any best-selling books. In fact, Confucius probably didn't write any books himself at all. He just shared his thoughts on how to live a happy, worthwhile life. When he died in 479 BCE, he likely looked back on his life with regret. The world was still chaotic, the rulers were still corrupt. He hadn't saved China. He was just an ex-government employee who had talked a lot but changed nothing. But here is the twist that Confucius never saw coming. After he died, his students refused to let his ideas die with him. They collected his sayings and wrote them down in a book called the Analects. They kept teaching his philosophy to the next generation and the next. Slowly, the tide began to turn. As the centuries passed, rulers began to realize that brute force wasn't enough to keep a diverse empire together. They needed a moral code. They needed a way to organize society that felt fair. Then, in 136 BCE, more than 300 years after his death, a miracle happened. The Han Dynasty officially adopted Confucianism as the central philosophy of the state. Suddenly, the words of the failed homeless wanderer became the law of the land. His 5 virtues became the standard for every government official. His ideas on family and respect became the DNA of Chinese culture. This system didn't just last for a few years. It lasted for the next 2,000 years. The impact of this failure is hard to overstate. He didn't just shape China, his ideas rippled across the ocean. Believe it or not, when Thomas Jefferson was helping to shape the United States of America, he was influenced by the philosophies of Confucius. The idea that a government should be virtuous and responsible for the welfare of its people, a radical idea in 500 BCE, became a cornerstone of modern democracy. Confucius teaches us a powerful lesson about success. We often judge our lives by immediate results, the promotion, the money, the recognition. But Confucius lost all of those things. By the standards of his day, he was a nobody. But he never compromised his principles. He kept planting seeds, even though he knew he wouldn't be around to see the harvest. He proved that you don't have to be a king to rule the future. You just have to be right. So, if you are feeling like you're struggling, like you're shouting into the wind and no one is listening, remember the old man from Khufu. Remember that the greatest victory in history started with a lifetime of rejection. What do you think is the most important of the 5 virtues for today's world? Honesty, loyalty, or knowledge? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to discover more incredible stories of history's underdogs, make sure to like this video and subscribe.